I couldn't agree with you more. I've been going since about 1986. It made the Bible in so many ways come alive, but I fell in love with the people, with the culture, with the nation. I took my children and my grandchildren right before the horrific October 7th attack. And we embedded ourselves, a good friend was having a bar mitzvah, we embedded ourselves within the Orthodox community and had Shabbat together and ate together and fellowship together, studied the Torah together, went all over Israel. And it was one of the most memorable, best times that we have had as a family. And so we are so grateful. I encourage Christians all over the world, you must make your journey to Israel.
Well, listen to Paula.
I say it will be the best.
We will welcome you. In Jerusalem and Nazareth and the Sea of Galilee and all the places that you hear about, they're not somewhere remote. They're real places. They're actually very close to each other.
Really?
So you can actually see where the Bible happened. You can actually see where it happened.
And
there are remnants too. I mean, there are churches. You know, there's a church right in the Sea of Galilee where Jesus preached.
Oh, yeah.
Birthright not paying the bills, I guess. I mean, it makes sense, right? Like if we're like sacrificing America at the altar just to continue our indefinite military excursions in the Middle East, if we're giving it all up for Israel, it makes sense that the evangelicals would be like, you know, we should do birthright like as Christians. It's deeply anti-Christian and anti-Jewish to suggest this, you know, but whatever, it doesn't matter. It's not like Netanyahu believes in Judaism or Paula White believes in Christianity, right? Like they're both just empty, soulless demons, so it doesn't matter, right? You know.
Capernaum, it's there, it's standing there. You can stand exactly where Jesus stood. You can walk in the footsteps of Jesus.
See, I'll just start
and the
going.
Hebrew kings.
The Pilgrim's Path.
And everywhere. And the prophets, all the prophets that you know, Jeremiah, Isaiah, you know.
It's so life transforming. I love going up to Shiloh this past time where Hannah prayed and just meditating there and seeing.
It's a tourism ad. Well, the reason birthright exists to begin with is to like, you know, indebt Jews to the state of Israel, right? Like the whole point is like, what if we took Western money investment in the in Israel and we used it as a like as a fulcrum, you know, as an incentive. We try to get, you know, Jews a free birthright trip and they can become Zionists essentially. You ever talk to a Jew who's been on birthright? It's all Zionist propaganda. You're not just learning about Judaism, okay? Oh, about like how the state of Israel protects us and it's the only place for us and so on and so forth. That's the whole point.
Just the richness of the Bible in its entirety. It makes everything make sense. And now the archaeological things that have been discovered and the findings that are still happening really give people such an education that I'll be honest, they will not get over here in America at 30 minutes in a church or an hour to church service. They certainly won't get in the universities over here.
Well,
it's almost, I say as a Christian, it should be mandated to go to Israel before you get to heaven.
Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, man. Remarkable. Vosh, I went on birthright and they literally explained to me that they couldn't let Arabs in because then it wouldn't be majority Jewish. Yeah, no, it's a fascist political project, you know? It's just meant to make Jews nationalist. Or in this case, Christian, I suppose. Is she supposed to be a Protestant? She's an evangelical.
Continue that understanding. Because as you said, Prime Minister, there's the little devil, the big devil in that ideology.
Sure.
And if people understood for many in a very terrorist mindset or an ideology that are raised that way, it is death to America. And they might not be speaking that. They are.
They do?
They are.
They do?
They are.
They do.
But they'd say it's not just about the destruction of Israel. It doesn't stop there. And I believe that is because of the foundation of faith.
Why are we watching this? Because it's politics? I'm not sure what you mean. Because it's politics? Because it's kind of crazy that the faith advisor to the White House, an evangelical, is arguing that Christians should need to profess fealty to Israel before they're allowed to go to heaven. Like, that's kind of insane if you think about it. Protestants don't have a pope, so we don't really have like a spiritual leader to turn to when it comes to doctrine, you know, over in this country for the most part. Most Americans are Protestants. It's insane. You caught me.
Believe that because we know two things, that America was founded on Judeo-Christian values and Israel is founded on Father Abraham, and we are out of that. And so we clearly understand that, many of us here in America, but we've got to make sure that we're educating.
It really is crazy how far that fake term has gone. Like, that's entirely a Dennis PragerU term, like constructed by Jewish fascists and Zionists to construct a false mandate of shared anti-Muslim Abrahamic faith. You know, it's not a real thing. Up until like the Vatican II, the Catholic belief was that Jews were responsible for the death of Christ. Look at the history in Europe between Christians and Jews. Like Judeo-Christian, you're putting a dash between them? What does that even mean? What's the difference between evangelical and Protestant? Evangelicals are like a particularly devout and crazy branch of Protestants. They're all evil, basically. They're all evil people, every one of them. I never understood that. The term Judeo-Christian is just a way of, one, propping up American support for Israel, and two, galvanizing people of the Abrahamic faiths against Muslims. The idea, essentially, is that Abrahamic faith is not on its own sufficient. Like, it is the Judeo-Christian wing of that faith. It's largely like a component of the Zionist project, right? It's not, there's no, like, in the context in which it is used is overwhelmingly to manufacture a false consensus between the West and Israel, as though they have some kind of like shared bulwark against the hordes of the East. I think to a large extent it's also been a way of pacifying Nazis, right? Because people who talk about Judeo-Christian values are overwhelmingly fascists. And a lot of fascists are Nazis. And Nazis, you might have heard this, are anti-Semites. And I think that Nazism has always been kind of inconvenient for a lot of MAGA, for a lot of like the right wing in America, because they're a little too crazy. Like, they're selectively useful, but also obviously, like, the administration doesn't want you being anti-Israel. The administration doesn't want you, you know, being so out there that you're galvanized against the Zionist project. So I think it's kind of a way of manufacturing consent in that direction.
The generations after us and continue to preach this, teach this, talk this, have it over dinner, research it, get the information, get it right, as you said.
But you know, people
Holy words.
People sometimes think that everything that trends that you saw before will continue indefinitely into the future. For example,
it's also purely an American Christian thing too. Yeah, speaking as an American, I can only say that I have only heard the term used by Americans. I have not heard any Christians from outside of America ever use that term. So I can't really say.
for example, people question whether the younger generation in Israel, which resorts sometimes to TikTok and other things, will they fight for our country and for our survival and our future when the test comes? They fought and fight like lions. Like lions.
Yes.
The Bible says they shall rise like lions, and they did, and they do. And people here say the next generation of Christians are, you know, are being weaned away or waning in their support for Israel. Maybe, but maybe also in their, you know, in their commitment to America's traditional values.
Oh, that's interesting. So I'm just reading. The term Judeo-Christian first appeared in a letter dated 1821, referring to Jewish converts to Christianity. Okay, that's not really what we're talking about here, of course. Nietzsche used the German term Juden-Christlich to describe and emphasize what he believed were neglected aspects of the continuity which exists between Jewish and Christian worldviews. Not really what we're talking about here. The concept of Judeo-Christian ethics, or values in an ethical sense, was used by George Orwell in 1939, along with the Judeo-Christian scheme of morals, interpretation of humanity. According to historian K. Helen Gaston, the term became a descriptor of the U.S. in the 1930s when the country sought to forge a unified cultural identity in an attempt to distinguish itself from fascism and communism in Europe. Interesting. Yeah, see? Kind of like a shared consensus against the East, I guess, in regard to communism, though obviously fascism wasn't the East. Becoming part of American civil religion by the 1940s, the term rose to greater prominence during the Cold War, especially when it used to express opposition to communist atheism. In the 1970s, the term became particularly associated with the American Christian right. It is sometimes employed in the separate context in political attempts to restrict immigration and LGBT rights. I think I think to a large extent, it's also meant to kind of like throw a bit of a boomerang with regards to Christian conservatism, where if a person says, like, you know, we're fighting for Christian rights or something, or for Christian ethics, it's like, oh, You religious boomer, you know. You Christian fundamentalist, you theocrat, you don't decide. But if you say Judeo-Christian, it seems like you're referring more to this like broader civilizational thing, which doesn't really make sense at all, because like what is that? What is Judeo-Christian civilization? What are you pointing to there? Like that's, you know, I don't really, it's kind of like a weird union of terms there, I think. If you, like, what tendencies are you referring to? They say the Judeo part to seem more inclusive. I just think that if a person said, you know, we need to fight for Christian values, it would be easier to criticize them than if they said, we need to fight for Judeo-Christian values. Because now it seems like you're not engaging in this partisan, theocratic, advocacy for religious doctrine, but rather for like a broader set of principles, you know? Because you can't be like a Christian bigot if you're just advocating for a broader set of principles. It's not even selective to Christianity, it's Judeo-Christian. And we can't be Nazis if we're advocating for Judeo-Christian values, right? You get what I mean. This is such 2016 discourse, oh my god. Well, it kind of stuck around, didn't it? I mean, you're right, but it stuck around. They still use the term Judeo-Christian all the time. And look at this shit. An evangelical fascist and a, you know, Israeli fascist, I mean, they're both Zionists, of course, sitting down and talking about how, like, Christians won't go to heaven unless they do birthright. What the f? Yeah, the White House does use the term officially. It's in, like, White House documents. They've issued in executive orders.
Who says that's got to continue? Right. I think there's a change happening right now. I think it just happened.
Yeah, I do.
I think a change just happened. And people seek spiritual content for their lives, and many are coming back to religion. And when they do, and when they look for the sources, the well springs of our civilization, our societies, they'll come back to the roots, and the roots came from from that land that you visit, that, you know, that piece of land at the edge of Asia, the edge of the Mediterranean is where it's all started. And, you know,
see, it's a nationalist project. It doesn't really have anything to do with religion. Ah, well, whatever. Blood and soil, blood and soil. It's all blood and soil stuff. Yeah, 100%. All religions a blight upon humanity. Yeah, but like the point that I've made before and I'm still making is that like neither of these people are religious. They don't actually believe in God. Or if they do believe in God, they don't believe it in any way that they'd convey to you or me. Their belief is like fake. They're fake people, right? They're just using religion as a pretext. Something I've been reading is that the state of Israel wants more American Christians to move to Israel to basically be cannon fodder. The reason being that most Jews that would already move there have, and that'll slow the growth of the Zionist project. I mean, it's not just like a cannon fodder thing. It's that they want Israel to be like a permanent hotbed of instability in the Middle East so we can always justify more military action there, you know? Obviously, you know, Zionists don't actually care whether or not it's Jews or Christians that control Israel. Functionally, Israel's already controlled by Christians. It's just they don't want, you know, Arabs there because they're racist. It's not really like a demographics thing. In a lot of areas of the world, Judaism is treated as an ethnicity. Yeah, that's true. But obviously, when we say ethno-state, we don't literally mean there is one single ethnicity, right? There are subcategories of Han Chinese, but China remains functionally a Han ethno-state, right? We're not really like, you know, we're not picking lettuce out of teeth here. We're talking about general tendencies. Look at any Israeli media internally. Like, they are very, very, very clear on their desire to keep a certain group of people in power and a certain group of people out of power. The long-standing mistreatment of non-white Jews, it's pretty obvious what is going on there, right? Like, we would call America an ethno-state if we kicked out all non-white people. But then you'd be like, well, there are like a million different ethnicities of white people. Yeah, they mean like racial state, obviously. You get me.